What? I don't know what's happening. I guess we're live. How's it going, guys? Sunday night AMA that I always do because I always get a ton of questions during the streams where I have topics, and then I do these AMAs and no one has any questions and I end up just talking about whatever. But I thought I would give you guys the opportunity to ask me whatever you like. And then a little bit later, I'm going to jump on and do a music stream. And just a quick disclaimer, if you see me chain smoking mapachos, I am not a smoker. And I do not endorse addictive, abusive use of tobacco. But if you guys could see around me right now, these walls are just, they're like little dots everywhere. And they're all chupacabras. They're all bloodsuckers. And the mapacho smoke helps keep them down. So that's what that's about. So I got this. Do you think if someone ate an ayahuasca bark, they would trip? No. You are needing to go consume quite a bit more than the bark. I mean, if you ate a bunch of bark, then yeah, you might. But no, people do mash it up and chew it as like a microdosing technique, I guess, or a way to microdose. And also because of the anti-inflammatory properties of the ayahuasca vine, some people say that it helps to restore damage from gum disease and to reduce inflammation in the mouth. So definitely not a bad idea to bust up some fresh vine and chew it. I've done it. It's kind of bitter. And I would say that, it's a pretty good bet that your preternatural senses are enhanced by microdosing ayahuasca. What is meant by microdosing matters to me. I think that if you're talking about like really, really microdosing, it probably isn't very effective. I think more research would help with this to try to figure out if there is like a minimum threshold where the cells respond at all. I'm sure we can do that pretty easily. Maybe someone has and I just missed the study. If somebody knows, let me know. But, I know that there's going to be like a margin where there's going to be like zero response from the brain. And, that's going to be pointless. So the point that I'm getting at is I think taking just enough to where you barely notice an effect is probably going to be, necessary to get any benefit at all. In fact, the studies I do know of have said that microdosing is indistinguishable from placebo. And the response that you usually get from the faithful on that one is, but I have taken psilocybin microdoses and I have benefited, to which you have to respond, somebody doesn't know what placebo means because placebo can cure cancer. It's really a reference to mind over matter. It doesn't mean that it doesn't actually do anything. It just means that it's your belief that is doing something and not the actual substance. But what I'm saying, I guess, is that in my experience, and I would amend this, though, and say it's probably better to take a whole brew, like I don't know what the word, like holistic brew, the whole finished brew, and microdose that rather than just chewing the Harmala alkaloids, because I feel like the DMT is going to have an awful lot to do with the neuroplasticity and neurogenesis and connecting you to those nether realms where precognition and those sort of experiences take place. It's going to help bring those filters down and facilitate that. And then, do I think all people have souls? I'm actually glad that you asked that question because I've been thinking about the concept of non-player characters a lot lately. And I'm increasingly convinced that this is dangerous territory. If you are really talking about this, if I'm going to speak about it honestly, definitely flirting with solipsism and at best, and bigger criticisms at worst. But I've actually looked into this quite a bit to look for actual studies and see if we have like a scientific basis for non-player characters, and there is actually something like 20% of people supposedly do not have metacognition at all, like none. And that's pretty crazy to think that there are people that literally are not capable of thinking about themselves at all. And then also, one in, I hesitate to quote the study because I don't know if I recall exactly the number, but I think it was 1 in 5 people doesn't have an internal narrator. So, you know, maybe I'm misunderstanding something. Maybe there are different ways of thinking. There are intuitive ways of thinking. But it sounds to me like that means that they literally don't have a narrative and therefore are not thinking at all. So, you know, this is actually an idea that Dolores Cannon talked about way back in like the 1970s or 1980s, I think. She was basically saying that a lot of the people in the world, the overwhelming majority of them actually, are just sort of like background characters, the same exact concept as non-player characters, and that they're there to fulfill a role and basically support the main characters. And it sounds terrible, it really does, but I would have to say that the evidence of our senses definitely supports it. You know, there are a lot of people out there that, like, if you look on Twitter, or really anywhere, but Twitter's a great example because people have to give like sound bites. And it's not just that people are repeating whatever narrative they think their demographic is supposed to be spouting at any given time, but they do it verbatim exactly the way everyone else does. So that really suggests to me that these people are basically just biological recording apparatuses, and that there isn't really any you know, autonomous thinking going on, that it's really just copy and paste humans, basically. And that's not really, you know, I mean, that's just not really, I don't know what else to say about that, because it's just all going to sound like, you know, Adolf Hitler, narcissist kind of attitude, because honestly, when I think about normies and muggles and the culture that they have created and sustained and the damage that it's done and the oppression and repression and just the general pointlessness of it all and the way that they actually look down on and will persecute and alienate and ostracize people that are trying to tell them the truth, and a truth that would liberate them and the people that they trap in their own mind-forged manacles, these prisons of, you know, limited perception and absent cognition, apparently. You know, I don't really have the furriest feelings towards them, and I try to live a life of compassion and empathy. But as I get older, instead of having more tolerance for that demographic of our world, I just dislike them more and more and more as time goes by. And perhaps it's because we're approaching a sort of omega point where the scales have been tipped because of the complacency and the inaction and the cowardice of these narrow-minded nitwits. You know, it's it just seems like an awful waste to have allowed them to be the predominant culture. You know, but the game's not over. It's not over, and I see what happened in the 1960s as kind of an aborted attempt at rectifying the situation. You know, we started to kind of push back in the 90s a little bit too. But what I'm realizing now, what I'm understanding, and this isn't really the most fun thing to realize, but I think it was already the paranoia had crept into the minds of the culture to the extent that we were already kind of weary of, starting formal organizations and organizing and really directly confronting society and the monster that our boomer parents had produced, and that's a scary thing to realize. We were aware of it too, but I think it's one of those things that you just really don't know what to do about. What are you going to do? What are you going to do against the prison industrial complex and the military industrial complex and all of these constituents of this machinery that are just so much bigger and more powerful, and the consequences of toying with them so extreme. It must be very comforting to have the kind of delusional belief in a fair society and a fair justice system that your average boomer liberal has. I can't imagine it. It seems infinitely dumb to me to believe that you live in a country like the United States where the police force is obviously trained not to arrest you if they have to, but to arrest you if they can. If they can find an excuse. And then when they hit you with charges, they don't charge you with the crimes they think you're guilty of. They charge you with everything they possibly think they can in order to try to frighten you into taking a plea deal. And the motivation for this is partly for the prosecutor to make their statistics look good. The justice system in the United States is totally fucked beyond belief, and now we're entering an era where AI is able to generate condemning evidence that isn't even real against any person. I try not to be paranoid, and I try to hope for the best, prepare for the worst, the rest is written, that whole thing. But when you look at the trajectory of things, and you consider the Patriot Act and some of the other developments in recent history, especially in the United States, but the UK too. The UK has actually arrested a bunch of people for stuff they've posted online, not because it was inflammatory, and they were not trying to incite riots. It was not necessarily promoting violence or hatred. Yes, do please smash the like button. We're going to go probably till just like 8:30 or so tonight. Sundays are always slow, but I'm feeling a little bit spunky tonight, and I also want to see if my guitar falls apart after it got beaten to death on top of that van. But what was I saying? Yeah, I mean, when you look at the trajectory of the legislation and the just overall gestalt of things, kind of looks like they're preparing, setting the stage for the elite to have the ability to just incarcerate anyone that they don't like forever. The Patriot Act, of course, has provisions that allow them to arrest people that fit the definition of a terrorist, which, if we pull it up and read it, it's very loose. Basically, anyone that doesn't just kind of do what they're told. And, no trial, no phone call, no lawyer, all of that stuff. And then they said they wouldn't use it against American citizens, but they didn't write that into the bill. So it has been used. Obama signed death warrants on 3 American citizens without a trial. They were all executed with no trial, which is supposed to be totally illegal in the United States. It doesn't matter what your excuse is. It doesn't matter what you're accusing them of. And in this case, and this is the real clincher, they were accused of planning something, but they hadn't done it yet. So now, not only have we executed people because they, without a trial, but they hadn't even committed the crime that they were being hypothetically accused of at some point in the future. You know what I mean? So that is really setting a precedent for some serious abuses of justice. And, of course, when you confront your average Obama-loving liberal with this shit, they'll just plant their head in the sand and scoff at you and roll their eyes and accuse you of being a Trump-supporting Nazi sympathizer or something. I mean, it's incredible, the fucking dumbfuckery that we have to contend with in this world, and just the fear, that people have to confront reality as it actually is, rather than, whatever terms they've had to reduce it to in order to live with it. Not the strategy that I endorse. I'd rather take the bull by the horns. I mean, you know what? If we're eternal, you guys, then who cares? Kill us, whatever, And I think that's one of the reasons that they really try to battle against enlightenment and illumination and discourage. They encourage all kinds of bullshit spirituality. That's fine, If you have some dumb narrative that is complete hogwash, the algorithm will push it all day long, So don't get it confused. They're not necessarily anti-spirituality. They're definitely not anti-religion. That one kills me. All the Christians that are like, they just want to get rid of Jesus. No, they don't. They endorsed Christianity for 2,000 years and stuffed it down everyone's throat so they could They could turn around and get rid of it later? No. It serves their purposes perfectly. It keeps people deaf, dumb, and blind, so they need someone to guide them. Like me. It's that Tool song, Opiate. That was the only good song in that album, I think. And that's what it is, It's like Jesus saying, you're deaf, dumb, blind, and born to follow. You need someone to lead you, like me. But yeah. So do they have a soul? I don't know. I mean, Then again, you guys, you can understand how all of this plays into the formula of creation in a way that makes it all absolutely necessary. And that's one of the things that I tell myself to try to push back against the feeling of cynicism and feeling jaded and overwhelmed, by, for example, seeing Biden on TV the other day saying, the S&P 500 broke record highs. Okay, dude. That's great. State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock are part of a corporate conglomerate that owns 88% of the S&P 500. So way to go, taking care of your fucking corporate cronies, bro. Amazing. Thank you so much. And the look on his face, if you can see that he knows. He's kind of a little red, and you can see his smile's a little embarrassed and stuff. He knows that it doesn't mean anything to the average person. But he also knows that the average brainwashed boomer out there is just yay, he's doing such a good job. He's doing such a good job spinning their little propeller on their hat and shit. And oh my God, man. And think about this, I swear to God, they love to rub people's noses in it because State Street, really, that's the name of the corporation that owns everything. They say that they'll own 60% of family homes in the United States by 2030, right? So State Street, the state, get it? Because, I'm sure you guys figured this out by now, but the 1% that owns all the stocks and property and corporations and all that shit, they're the state. Don't get it fucked up. You know what I mean? Isn't that communism? Isn't that what communism is? Where the state owns everything and then the people just kind of get the crumbs that fall off the table? That would never happen in the United States, though. There would never be miles and miles of homeless camps in the United States. Not with... And by the way, since I'm ragging on the left a little bit here, I am so sick and fucking tired of people commenting, yeah, that's what happens when you let a bunch of lefties take over the government. Shut the fuck up. The trajectory is the same under red presidents. The consolidation of wealth was worse than ever under Reagan and Bush. Just shut up. You're not doing anyone any favors. If you're still playing partisan politics, you are a flaming fucking moron. All the way. You're brain dead to the point where you are a sandbag on humanity's fucking hot air balloon. Just stop it. It's all owned by State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock. They're all puppets of those guys. I'm so tired of it, man. I don't want to talk about it either, really. How did we get on this subject? But it's true, They're all owned by the same people. They're all owned by the same people, and it doesn't matter, red, blue, whatever, the trajectory stays the same. How do people not notice that? DeFi will wipe out all that. No, it won't. No, it won't. The reason DeFi won't wipe all that out is because people cannot get their heads on the same page. the only way that crypto, DeFi, any of these things, all these alternative methods of rule really is what it comes down to. The only way that would happen is if people would all buy the same thing and hold it, you know? But as long, look, Jim Morrison said this way back in the 60s, I think, or 70s probably. The Doors were more like the 70s, right? And I'm not even a huge fan of Jim Morrison. I think he was kind of a phony. But he wasn't wrong sometimes. And I've always said that, you know, that if you switch to a different ism-schism game, it's not going to matter if the consciousness of the people hasn't changed first. It's going to be the same shit show with a different flavor, a different label, different, you know, it's like cat turd, dog turd, or monkey turd. Like which flavor would you like for your shit sandwich today, sir? You know, and Jim Morrison all the way back in the 70s said that, you know, the change has to happen within. Otherwise, you can elect whoever you want. You can, you know, doesn't matter. Until people change fundamentally somehow, there's no possibility of changing. And that goes for economic ploys like cryptocurrency as well. I was on board with it at first too. Like, okay, well, this is how we take the power away from the banks. This is how we redistribute the wealth. But unfortunately, I'm kind of naive, I guess, in the ways of the world. And I didn't realize that, you know, 80 billion cryptocurrencies would launch, completely oversaturate the market, destroying any possibility that any one of them could get enough momentum to actually do anything. You know? So there has to be real leadership. There has to be some sort of common goal and some kind of common interest in order to unite people and mobilize them. And our society has been very much intent on limiting people's interest to the scope of their own ass. The dimensions of their own ass pretty much define the parameters of their interests. It's not going to work. It just is not going to work. It will not work, you know. Something hit me about global warming today that this is something I've refused to take a position on, because on the one hand, I can see how the elite will use anything they can to try to manipulate and leverage the people and the situation into whatever serves them. Of course they're going to do that. They're going to do that with anything. So, you know, there's all kinds of different elements of this. The polar bears are definitely all dying. The ice caps are definitely melting. This shit definitely happens all throughout human history. But my logic as a magician, right, as a shaman, as a initiate, is to, you know, understand that all systems are basically the same, and like kind of follows like. So if you have a biological system like a human, and when it gets an infection and some shit is about to kill it, it gets hot, and then that kills the thing that is trying to kill the bigger thing. And so you have these humans running around on this planet, considering dropping nukes all over everything for no reason, basically. Just because I guess the billionaires that run the shit show don't feel like they're billionaire enough. They need more billionaireness or something. I don't know what the fuck their problem is. I don't understand. Yeah, well, we'll see normal state. Like I said, if people can get on the same page, then maybe. But until then, it's just, and so far, it's just been a shit show. So we'll see. But I guess, you know, I don't know. Like, what does Putin want? Like, what does he want? He really, you know, I want to get rid of the deep state because I hate Satan. No, man. He's just trying to get the right stirred up in the U.S. That's all he says that shit for. You know, it's got nothing to do with a battle versus good and evil. That's just so dumb. It's incomprehensible that anyone would believe that kind of rhetoric at this point, unless they're religious, and then nothing surprises me. There is no limit to the delusional capacity, or there's no bottom to the lowness of the IQ of religious people. So I guess I can see why they would think that it's a battle of good and evil. Anyways, Putin and whoever else, Bill Gates, these people, you know, why it is that they feel like they need to beef with each other and rain down the same energy that lights the stars upon their enemies. I don't know, but the Earth probably doesn't like it, and it also doesn't like that 90% of the ocean life that was there in the 1970s is gone, and it probably doesn't like, plastic islands the size of France forming, and on and on, right? I mean, rainforests almost gone. They say the Amazon where I live is going to look like the Saharas by the middle of the 2030s, the Sahara Desert. I mean, so it stands to reason to me that the Earth would get hot and try to kill its infection. So I've always thought, it's just too much hot button. People have their minds too made up. It's one of the most, people are so committed to whichever side of that argument they're on. And none of them are really that bright, so I'm not really compelled by either side. But then today I thought of something that really kind of got to me. If the water rose 100 feet or whatever, I don't even remember what the guy was saying, 30 feet or something. It was something about England, right, would be gone. It's not much. It doesn't take much. The banks would have stopped lending. You would not be able to get a loan to build a house in the UK. You would not be able to get a loan to build a house on the beach. These are 30, 40-year mortgages. Banks don't fuck with that kind of risk. They don't believe it. Period. End of story. So, when I put those little pieces together, I was like, they do know it's bullshit. It's that simple, man. It's that simple. And I mean, anyone that would argue with that logic is either brain dead or naive. There's no way around it. The banks wouldn't do it. By the way, if you guys have any, this AMA has turned into another rant. So, what the hell? The bugs are not nearly as bad as I expected. So I guess yeah, I mean, I hope so. And I hope, one of the things that I was thinking would consolidate the buying is AI, right? If we're using AI to vet cryptos and analyze market conditions, we're all using the same program probably. We're all paying attention to each other. We're all going to figure out what works. And it's going to tell us all to do the same thing. That could actually resolve this problem of market saturation and people buying all kinds of different stuff and selling all the time whenever someone, every time a whale farts, the fucking coin collapses or whatever, That's really the thing. People have to consolidate their will. And don't get me wrong, I'm still trying to have faith that this is all going somewhere meaningful. But it's harder and harder for me to imagine convincing people all of a sudden to live for a purpose instead of just hedonism and the echo chamber of narcissists, which is what I call social media, is not doing anything to help the circumstances. I am not. Yeah, I guess I didn't even make a. I didn't even set the live stream up for later, did I? But it's going to happen. By the way, hit the like button, subscribe, support us on Patreon, or send millions of dollars of cryptocurrency or any other method that you would like to the addresses that I'm about to pop into the chat. I've decided that I'm going to try to cut our time here in Pucallpa as short as possible because it's the rainy season and the mosquitoes are it's too much, man. I can't do it. So we are going to spend some time with the shamana and learn as much as we can, but I need to bag an extra 3K this month so that we can go ahead and get to Cusco in comfort and yeah, support us. It hurts. Itches and itches. All right, so we have no questions. Why do you guys do this? Why do you guys always do this? Every AMA, no one has any questions. And then if I go and I do a stream about something in particular, there'll be all these completely unrelated random questions in the chat. And then I think, okay, well, Sunday I will do a stream and I will offer an opportunity to ask all that random shit. Yeah, well, the guitar's okay. It's not destroyed. I just, it's hard to tell exactly until I pick it up and try to play it. But it looks like it just took some nicks out of the neck and ripped the strings off of it and stuff. So, by the way, I can see some people jumping on. I'm trying to get questions from people so that they don't ask them during the streams where I actually have something specific that I'm trying to communicate. But, like I was saying about the whole revolution, the evolution, revolution, it makes sense. All of these elements that got us to this point. There's a spectrum to everything. And at each end of those spectrums, which isn't really an end, it's more of a continuum, I guess, but you know what I mean. At the extremes of this continuum, around the dial, there's opposites. And so in order for humanity to be the most intelligent creature on this planet, in a lot of ways, it also has to be the dumbest creature on this planet in a lot of ways. Because everything contains its contradiction, and there are opposites of every single thing under the sun in perfect balance. And so, in the spectrum between, and this goes back to the original question about, whether these people have no soul. Yeah, so we're still going to do retreats in Peru, but I'll finish this thought real quick. So the spectrum, right? We're talking about the NPCs with no soul and how they make up the mainstream. That's just the spectrum. You have the brilliant illuminated, and then you have decreasing, and you have the widest swath of indeterminate gobbledygook in the middle. So, and it also makes sense to me that when you're trying to produce a diamond, you have a tremendous amount of coal, and it is pressure and time that compresses that coal into a diamond. But there's way more coal than diamonds. And so, the pressure when you have a story comes from the antagonists of the story. So without the threat without existential threats, without the potential for nuclear war, without evil and tension, without tension in a song, it would be very boring because you would only have and there would be no melody, there would be no drama, you know what I mean? I mean, you guys know the story. So, when I think about all of that, I'm able to convince myself on my better days that that's the whole point of it, that, it will all compress into a jewel, and we can see from the patterns in history that have come before us that there are sometimes leaps in evolution. The missing link is the best example of that. And if it happened once before, because everything is a repeating pattern, it will happen again. And so it seems certain to me that we are on one such precipice. It may be a precarious precipice that we are perched perilously upon, but it stands to reason that the jewel in the center of the lotus will emerge at the crescendo of human history, and If not, we won't know anything anyways, because it's either the mushroom cloud of Oppenheimer or the mushroom cloud of Leary and McKenna that stands at the end of history. And I have a feeling we're going to find out which in about 11 minutes and 11 seconds. Yeah, we're still doing retreats in Peru right now. I am booking for Dina, who... as a young girl, she learned from her grandmother the jungle plants and shamanic techniques. And in the original way, where the shaman is the one that drinks the ayahuasca. And a lot of the criticisms that I've offered on this channel about the ayahuasca industry, she actually mentioned them in our interview, which kind of made me feel like I was with a kindred spirit and actually encouraged me to come back and work with her. And also she mentioned that the dieta is pretty much complete bullshit that was created by white people. And that is also true. It is originally plantains and fish, if there's any kind of preparatory practices that go into that. White rice and chicken, she specifically mentioned as ridiculous. And it's for the exact same reasons that I always mention. There have only been white rice and chicken in South America for a few hundred years. So nobody was preparing for ayahuasca by eating white rice 1,000 years ago or whatever. Yeah, so I'm booking for her now, basically no more than 3 people at a time. It's very rustic. There's no showers. There's no real electricity. There's a solar panel so you can keep your phone charged. And you just have to get a chip from one of the local companies and you can have internet, but no Wi-Fi, no proper showers, none of that. And she is working with all of the plants in the jungle. So I'm planning to do Toei dieta, which is about the most extreme plant that you can sort of get into bed with. But yeah, if you have some sort of physical malady or you know someone else that does, this is a really good opportunity to work with someone who has an extensive knowledge of the entire pharmacopoeia of medicine available to you in the jungle. And then after that, we are going to Cusco still to go up into the Andes and focus more on Andean medicine, although there will be a trip in the middle of the retreat down into the rainforest. So we will see both sides of the coin during that period. And yep. So did I ask you guys? Yeah, I did. Okay. So, again, you guys, AMA questions. Everyone's always got questions for me until I do an AMA. And then there's, what's wrong with y'all? I mean, what did I put in the title? Esoteric Symbolism, Plant Medicine, and Metaphysics. What is there to say about metaphysics? You know, I mean, I think everyone at this point should understand what the universe is. It's not really that hard to understand our place and our role and our objective and where it should be going, whether it actually goes there or not. Light became conscious, which created duality, which may or may not have been a bad bargain. And we are the sensory organs of the universe, experiencing everything that we possibly can from every possible perspective until we have exhausted all the possibilities that are made available to us without overriding or overextending natural law. And then the whole process reverses and it collapses back into the singularity and starts over again. So that's the whole metaphysical model in a nutshell. Can you take us through a ceremony with you? What is the experience like? Let's talk about connecting with spirits on psychedelics. Well, it depends on what the plant is, and it depends on what the objective is, and it depends on whether we are working with, oftentimes if I am working with an indigenous shaman, I will just assist, or I will not do anything at all, and I'm just there basically if anything gets out of control, because for whatever reason, most of the time I'm working with female shamanas that are very diminutive. I don't do that on purpose. It's just how it's happened. And so, you know, if somebody loses it, then they're not really able to like jump on their shoulders and like hold on for dear life while the person runs around the jungle or whatever. I mean, it doesn't really happen, but, you know. Basically, I was taught in the Shuar way, and so a circle is cast in exactly the same way that it would be in Hermetic tradition. And sometimes I will do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which is basically intended to clear the area, and or depending whether it's invoking or banishing, to draw certain forces down into the circle or to send them away. Oftentimes I'll open with a like simplified version of that, and then if anything has come up that seems, you know, like it necessitates banishing at the end, I will do that at the end. Like if anyone has a really hard time or something, a lot of times I'll do that. And it includes an invocation of archangels and whatnot. And it should be understood that in my view of this, I don't really believe in literal spirits or God or any of that stuff. But I do think that there's energy and there is a fundamental kind of intelligence that's integrated into the whole system, and it is possible to interact with and direct that. So for me, you know, something like an invocation of archangels is not necessarily very literal. And then tobacco is used in many traditions, but for the Shuar, it's particularly important, I think. And a tea, I guess, made from tobacco that's been soaked in water overnight, heated usually, is taken through the nose. And it has a number of purposes, but mostly it is to focus the mind, because the mind is the instrument that is interacting with the energy. It is your consciousness. And so when you pray for the Shuar, the tobacco is the main tool that helps you to focus, because the difference between prayer in the shamanic context, or the way that the Shuar think, or the way that the Hermetic magician thinks, is actually pretty similar. You do not want to send your prayers to some imaginary sky god, because you're just sending them off into nothingness. You want to focus your will and your concentration directly upon the object that you desire to cause change in, right? So that's really the point of the tobacco in a pragmatic sense, is to focus the consciousness and allow you to direct it. It also, during the ceremony, can help you if you get overwhelmed or confused. You take it, it focuses the mind. Oftentimes you'll vomit. If you need to vomit, it will help to push that through and allow the purging to happen. And so you'll take the tobacco first, and then we sit for a moment, and then anyone that wishes to speak about their intentions or hopes and desires for that particular ceremony, or you can just sit and focus on it yourself. You're given a little piece of copal to symbolically toss into the fire after your prayer, and smells wonderful, by the way. And where am I at with this? Yeah, so anyone that wants to speak, you can speak, or you can keep it to yourself if it's too personal. And then the medicine is served, and then there is silence until I feel the medicine start to work. And then I will use the suripanga, which is a plant that is used to cleanse. You'll see a shaman like slapping people on the head with it, and but the sound of it has a very interesting relationship to the energy of ayahuasca, and it's something that you kind of have to experience to really understand, because it doesn't. There's no way to communicate it if you haven't experienced it. And there is a way of using the sound of the leaves and connecting it with the grid of information that you can see when you drink the ayahuasca that allows you to kind of control it and make sure it's settled and ease everyone into the ceremony. And that's usually accompanied by a sort of icaro, but it's a very simple sort of sound, mostly consisting of B, 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 B kind of sounds and V, V, B, B, V, V. And it's kind of out of tune deliberately because when you dip to these kind of tension tones that are in music theory speak would be like a quarter step out, it sort of tugs on the energy that is out of alignment in the same way that when you play an out of key note on an instrument, it causes tension, and you can resolve that by going to an inside tone. So the song allows me to find places in the network of energy that are not as they should be and kind of use sound to pull them into place. And then there's silence again for a while. And when I sense that there is something happening with someone, it's a very interesting thing because it's not necessarily conscious. I'll just be there talking about something, or I'll find a certain icaro that's appropriate. And, you know, I always hear from people that at those moments it was like exactly the thing. So it's a really interesting kind of intuitive connection that you have. That is the reason why ayahuasca was given the name telepamine or telepathine. And then sometimes I'll play recorded music. Sometimes I'll play music on the guitar. Just depends on the energy of the moment and what the situation seems to require. And then at the end of the night, when everyone is settled again, we will usually pass the talking stick around, and everyone talks a little bit about their experience, and then we banish and close the ceremony. But, you know, if it's different. If it's Mama Celia that's running the show, or Juanita, who is Shipibo, and I actually have not drank with Dina yet, but I'm sure that that's also a very different experience. So that's that. And then I saw another question. Yeah, I know J.D. Temple and some of those other guys. One of the people that you mentioned inspired some Satanists to go and kill some teenagers, and his response when he found out about it was not cool. It was really callous and insane. So you might want to rethink that guy. I don't think he has an ounce of decency in his entire being. I'm sure you know which of them I'm talking about. But yeah, JD, I know JD. He definitely has good intentions. I don't always agree with him. And then he asks about connecting with spirits on psychedelics. So, you know, that's something that I have kind of a different attitude towards. You know, I'm not one of those people that came into the ayahuasca scene and just decided to believe whatever my teacher believes or whatever. You know, that's a really common thing that happens, and I don't think it's really healthy to just absorb other people's traditions and beliefs about things, especially when you kind of take an objective evaluation, do an objective evaluation of what all these different tribes think. And if you know the history, as I do, and realize that a lot of these tribes have not been drinking ayahuasca for hundreds of years, they've been drinking ayahuasca for 12 years, like the Bora. And people just kind of assume that these traditions are ancient and that everyone developed these techniques the same way because ayahuasca taught them to. It's not real. It's not true. There's a lot of evidence actually that Shipibo, who claim a multi-thousand-year tradition, have been drinking for 70 years and no more. So, you know, because I started studying ayahuasca in the late 80s or early 90s, I am kind of aware of what it was like before the influence of the internet, and you know, I've watched a lot of shamans kind of conform to the expectations of the industry, you know, because tourists, very arrogant, narcissist, tourists doing it because it's trendy come down and the shaman does something that is actually traditional but is not consistent with what they read about on the internet, and so they think he's fake, and it causes all sorts of weird energy in the group when the person confronts them. I've seen this happen, and it's one of the dumbest and most absurd and sad things that I've ever seen in my life. And it has actually compelled a lot of the shamans to start pretending that the, perception that people have, the expectations that they have, is actually consistent with historical tradition, and it's not. So the reality is that Pachamama is not universally female. The spirits that are connected to Chacruna and Kapi are not regarded as male and female in that order by all of the tribes. They aren't. So you don't have an objective interpretation of any of these phenomena. So that suggests that it's a subjective thing, and it's not objectively real, right? A lot of people, for example, say that Pachamama is female, but there was a study that was done where 150 people that had no preconception were given ayahuasca, and they were split 50-50 down the middle, whether it was male or female. So if you're not given an expectation, the tendency is to perceive it however you want to, right? So the first bit of advice I guess I have, if you're planning to try to use psychedelics to interact with spirits, if you really want to know what they are and you really want to understand this phenomena as it actually exists, try your best to let go of preconceptions. Because chances are pretty good that almost nothing you've heard is objectively true. It's just people's ideas, and people parrot other people, and they're monkeys, and primates imitate each other. So, I don't necessarily view these things necessarily as spirits. I don't know what the phenomena is. I've spoken with indigenous shamans that actually think this way as well. That they just don't know. Terrence McKenna said that he said some of the best shamans that he met will admit that they really don't know what it is that we're dealing with. Having said that, though, it is true that I have received very specific and always correct information from these ayahuasca spirits. Never once have I been lied to unless there was a lesson and it was a temporary deception. In other words, the spirit would tell me the thing and then wait for me to go through this process and then say, okay, chill out, I was lying or just kidding or whatever. One of the times it was absolutely adorable what Pachamama did with this because she was trying to show me my trust issues and she lied to me about something. And after I'd gone through this process and I was like really mad, I was like, I can't believe you did that to me. I was so goddamn mean. And I was sitting on the toilet and I look over to the left and there's this robot like made of light, and it like rolls up and it's almost like the Jetsons robot. Remember that maid? It had like a little maid thing on and the whole 9 yards. And it was carrying a tray of like presents made of like gelatin light, I guess. When it slid up and stopped, the presents all were like until they were still, like wiggling back and forth like Jello. And she's like, here, I'm sorry. And I guess I was supposed to open the gifts. And it's one of the biggest regrets of my entire life, honestly, that because I was mad at her. So I was like, I don't want your stupid gifts or whatever, So I refused them. And I didn't take the bow off and look inside of the boxes. And I can only imagine if I had taken the bows off and looked in there, what kind of amazing shit there would have been, And I wouldn't even be surprised if I couldn't have actually taken something back to the teepee and shown everyone, like, look what she gave me, And of course I realized that I am speaking of Pachamama after just saying that, no one really knows whether it's male or female. When it comes to the experience, I just kind of go along with whatever's happening as if it's objectively real. But, you kind of have to compartmentalize a little bit if you're really interested in trying to understand what this phenomena is. So and I guess another important element to it is that if you are going to approach this with the mentality of a traditional shaman or a hermetic magician, I think going through the protocol of, casting a protective circle that represents your universe. And this is interesting to me that both Hermetic magicians, or all of them, druids, whatever tradition you're talking about, this practice of defining a circle and then managing the energy within the circle is universal throughout all traditions. The ayahuasca circle, in any kind of ceremonial ritual that I'm aware of, shaman always makes a circle that defines the temporary universe, the microcosm that he is working within, and he regulates the forces within that circle. But yeah, these kind of practices, whether we're talking about objectively real spirits or not, are worth doing because they at least ensure that you are in a frame of mind where you feel confident that you have, you are the one that is determining the nature and intention of the energies and beings that can enter into those circles. It's also worth noting, I think, that in all the years that I have been drinking ayahuasca or messing around with different occult traditions, never once has an entity that I have encountered told me to do anything bad or evil or to harm myself or anyone else. So that's, I think, something important to note. I have never taken a boga. Scanning through okay, I have time for maybe one more question, and then I'm going to set up for my music stream. Going once, going twice. Sold to nobody, the highest bidder for nothing. All right, guys, thank you for spending this time with me. Please consider joining our Patreon or supporting us through one of the options in the chat, and I'll see those of you that pop over for the music stream there. Otherwise, I'll see you probably Tuesday or Wednesday. Oh, wait, there's oh, hey, man, was the dog situation okay? Yeah. So for those of you that aren't aware of this, when the dog yesterday, I heard a bunch of ruckus, and it sounded really bad. And then one of the guys that lives here walked by the window, and I was like, hey, is everything all right in there? And he's like, no. And I was like, shit. But then I didn't really hear screaming or it didn't really seem like anything terrible had happened. So I didn't leave the live stream, but it was kind of unfocused because I was, worried. And then it was just quiet in there for too long. So I was imagining them stuffing the intestines back into a hole in the dog or something, because our pit bull's pretty big and she's never bitten anyone or attacked anything. But if she did, I could see that it would be bad. And she's pregnant, so her attitude is a bit different. So I was pretty concerned. I shut the stream down early, and there was no holes in any dogs or anything. So long story short, there were no serious injuries or anything. It was fine. All right, guys. So thanks again for supporting me, spending this time with me. I hope it was illuminating. And I will see you, whoever shows up in the music stream, in a few minutes.